All right, welcome to Real Reason TV. I'm your host, Chester West, and today's segment, we're going to be covering a really specific subject matter on negative imagery on the African mind. Stay tuned. All right, with no further ado, I want to introduce my guest to Real Reasons TV, starting with your right, my left.
Okay. I'm Shifu Dr. Thompson, retired professor of communication and also Tai Chi instructor.
In the center?
Jeff Menzise, Doctor of Clinical Psychology, Professor of Clinical Psychology, lead life coach at Mind on the Matter.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kristal Owens. I'm Executive Director of Empowerment Center, and my background is in counseling and psychology.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, is it on?
Yeah, it's on now. Okay. All right, so welcome to the show once again, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get into the discussion of negative imagery on the African mind. So I posed this question after watching videos after videos and social media. Why do negative videos, whether they're young women or young men fighting all the time, getting so more likes and so much viewership than opposed to someone who is speaking positive, getting scholarships and going to school? So I want each one of my panelists to give in their professional Spanish, in their professional opinion, just a vague kind of answer on what do they initially think attracts the African mind to negative imagery. Shifu?
Okay. All right, I'll start. If you're fed something all the time, after a while it becomes your normal part of your normal diet. And if you really think about it, the propaganda that is always flooding us through every means, the educational system, through the religious institutions, through the political institutions, everything that we hear all the time bombarding us because of this institutional framework is designed to have consistent content that is always pulling people here, pulling people there, and it's part of a larger perception management system. It's always telling us from the time that we're conceived, and you're sitting in the womb there and trying to gestate, and you're hearing this stuff is coming through your parents, it's coming through your ancestors, it's coming through everybody. You're no good, you're violent, you're this, you're that. The time you come out through the birth canal, now the real bombardment starts. You're probably going to end up in jail, you know, and all this kind of stuff, right? Like Jawanza Kunjufu used to talk about all the time. So by the time we get to an age where we can make decisions on what we're going to do, we already consider it normal for us to be in a negative space.
I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, how about yourself?
Like Amos Wilson, you spoke about him a little bit earlier off camera. Amos Wilson, he talked about how our tastes are created for us. And he talks about how our tastes are created for us by people who profit from us, you know, being dysfunctional, in other words. And so, you know, I see that part of it, and then I understand it from there to mean that we're actually conditioned to enjoy and to actually prefer that type of imagery over, you know, what you were saying as far as the conscious or positive messages. The other thing is that sometimes in the positive messaging, you get a lot of judgment being lashed at the people, you know, who may be conditioned to prefer the other way. And, you know, people are naturally going to shy away or remove themselves from anything that seems to be punishment or painful, you know, in that respect. So if I'm trying to get enlightened and the so-called enlightener is judging me negatively and making me feel bad about who I am, and at the same time they're saying that who I am is not because of me, but because of some powerful external forces, then I'm going to be like, well, what is this guy? Why would I sit here and take this from this individual who's only talking and not necessarily doing anything to help pull me up out of this? The other piece is that, you know, sometimes it's entertainment, you know, and it's exciting to watch fight videos. You know, sometimes people's lives are so depressed and depressing, meaning literally your energy is being depressed or pushed down, that you need something exciting to kind of wake you up and bring your energy back up. You know, so I mean, from all those different angles is why I see us having a preference for or participating more in what we would call the quote-unquote negative imagery as opposed to the so-called positive imagery. Then the other thing too though is that we've got a warrior class out here that's not actually functioning as warriors. And so warriors are attracted to combat. And so I think a lot of our youth, especially the ones that's in the streets on the front lines, gang banging and all that, that's our warrior class. They may not have their generals with the proper marching orders, you know, giving them proper marching orders, but they're still in warrior mode. And so warriors gravitate towards war type things. But it's undirected. Or let me say it's being directed, but it's being misdirected right now. You know, and so it seems to be, you know, overcoming.
Okay. Okay. How about yourself, Dr. Owens?
I think it's our very survival to be warned. It's like warning systems. And there is a study that was done at Ohio State University. And what they did was they used 3 different stimuli. One positive, say for instance, it could be a Bugatti or a leather coat, and showing those images. And it showed how the stimuli had a positive effect. And then there was another stimuli which was more neutral, a plate, a spoon, just neutral, no effect, but it didn't, the brain didn't jump as high as a Bugatti. But what they found, the preponderance of the stimuli occurred when they saw something negative. It could have been somebody that was shot, or it could have been something that was just really negative. It just really spiked in terms of the brain's response. And they know, and like that of other researchers, that people gravitate to the negative as a survival method, as a way to overcome a situation. It's almost like a warning sign. It's like a stop sign. There's other traffic coming, so the red is more profound than the green. And so if that is the case, then that really takes hold on the brain more than it would for the negative, for the positive. And it's just like if you get a negative review on your job, that has more of a hold, surprisingly, than the positive review. So if someone makes a bad comment about you when you're 10, that may reverberate in your life until you're 50 or 40 when you actually deal with this issue. So the brain does this just automatically. So think about in our community how this can take a hold. When we have negative comments about each other, and then that negative comment becomes a behavior. And that negative comment also becomes how we see each other. So I think it's just being human, but it's even more profound when you deal with the racial dynamic.
So, okay, so I've taken each opinion or each insight in consideration, right? But then there's a side of me that asks, okay, well, when is it that the fighting and the negative stimuli gets so extreme that it becomes appalling? That now the positive has to kick in. Is there a line that you just cross where we have to begin reverting and wanting more positive imagery in our psyche?
No, it's not something automatic. It's something that, let me take it a couple of angles here. When you're being trained in social engineering, because we have a well-oiled social engineering machine here. Kwame Ture, back in the early 1980s, gave a talk at University of Maryland. And there was one quote that he had from that talk that sticks with me all the time. He said, "This capitalist system with its well-oiled propaganda machine has the ability to make you think you're thinking when you're really not." Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, all right. Now,
That is profound.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I used to work in social engineering before I got into education. And, you know, so I was a content generator. And, right. And one of the key elements of it is to attack people subliminally based on the knowledge. It's basically what Dr. Kristal just said about what gets into your mind. If it goes into your emotional field, before you have a chance to consider it rationally, they got you, right? So one thing that I always teach my students, I still teach on an adjunct basis. I retired 9 years ago, but I still teach on an adjunct basis, and I write about this stuff. We only do, as a human being, you only do what you feel. You can think it, oh, I shouldn't eat that piece of cake because I know I'm trying to lose weight, but then the next thing you know, you're eating it because you're not feeling not eating it, right? Right? You're feeling eating it because you're eating for taste, right?
I'm guilty of that.
So, well, everybody is, right? Right? Right?
Yeah.
So, whatever you feel and it was real to you and it provides you with satisfaction, it's important for us to know. You all know a lot about technology. I know something about how technology transfers and relates to human processes, right? Because all technologies are extensions of human processes, right? So computers have a binary code. That binary code is zeros and ones, right? The on signal, the one is the on signal, zero off signal. Well, that's actually a poor representation or micro version of the human binary code. The human binary code, though, is in the emotional field. And the on signal for a human is pleasure. The off signal is pain, right? So what the propaganda system is based on doing is feeding you discomfort. The persuasion process, if you go and take sales training, you're trying to make the prospective client uncomfortable first. So they're looking around for something to fix their discomfort. You see? That's why you go in a store, you know, or you're talking to a salesperson, they say, "You want to save money, don't you?" Right? They're trying to make you uncomfortable with your current choices and behaviors. Yeah. Right? So you're always being attacked that way. You don't be, you know, if you want to make it, you want to get ahead, they're always saying you're not good enough right now. You see? So that you will look around for a fix. And of course, the one who's telling you you're not good enough is the one who's telling you they have the fix for you. You see? So after a while, nobody even knows to question this stuff because all of their experience is within that field. So there's no point at which you all of a sudden just wake up. It's just like if you have a physical pain, one more thing and then I'll heal the floor. If you have a physical pain, let's say you scratch your skin. Well, you're going to your body system is going to form a scab, right? And the scab will eventually fall off. But when you have an emotional cut, there's no scab that comes off by itself. And what you were asking is kind of like that, right? You have to go in there and reverse it. You have to do it consciously, because if you don't, it'll stay there.
Yeah, okay. Doc, you're saying, I mean, because from what he just said, it sounds to me as though you have put in so much power into someone else that you have lost the ability to heal yourself.
So I would say the power is not put into somebody else.
It's just taken from you.
No, somebody else has studied where the power is, and they take full advantage of it.
Okay.
Right? You know, so in other words, knowing the disposition and how human beings are wired and human beings react to stimulation, you study that, then you master that. And when you master that, then you master them. And that's what marketing is. I always tell folks that marketing is pure psychology. It's psychology applied.
It absolutely is.
It gets you to do something that you didn't do before, or it gets you to do something that you did before but do it differently, or it gets you to do something that you did before and do more of it, right? And you know, so in other words, differently, doing it differently, smoke a different brand of cigarettes, right? You already smoke, but smoke this brand instead,
Right.
You don't smoke, but you want to smoke, right? Because or you do smoke, but you're only smoking 2 cigarettes a day. Come on, let's get you up to this pack.
That ain't cool.
Every time you see this dude, he's chopping off a cigarette. Ain't he cool? Right? And so it's the study of human beingness and the mastery thereof.
Yeah.
That's where the power is.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that we're so externalized and we're so caught up, is what Shifu was saying, we're so caught up in this rat race that somebody dropped us in. Like, yeah, I doubt if a rat running that maze really realizes that somebody put him in that maze. Set the maze up, put the goal where it is, and put the cheese there. You know, the rat probably doesn't think that. They're probably not conscious of that.
Right.
They just run the maze.
Right.
They just figure out, if I hit this lever 5 times, I'm going to get another pellet.
Right.
Right.
You know, the dog salivating that when that light came on, when the person brought the food in, they're not associating that for themselves.
Right.
And it's proven because when that light comes on and there's no food, their mouth still waters.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's that unconscious programming. That's right. Right? And when you're programming people on that level, there is no tipping point that makes people say, negative, negative, well, gotta go back to positive. Ain't no got to, because this stuff is externally being controlled and manipulated. What can happen is that eventually people will break, and when they break, they're broken. So the person that's benefiting from the person being on this roller coaster, this up and down, is what Shifu was saying. Take you down, bring you back up.
Sure.
What they'll do is they will bring you back up before you hit the breaking point, because they want lifelong customers. And so if everybody just keeps dying and keeps falling off, which would be the reason why you've got information out there that seems to counteract the standard American diet. You got all this natural food, you got all these organic markets and stuff now, right? To me, that's coming from that same machine that says we got to get something for everybody.
Yes.
We got to get those folks who know that they're physically unfit, give them a little bit to make them desire to be fit, and then we'll profit from that too.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't want to kill everybody off with cancer, right? We want everybody having heart disease. So we're bringing them up and keep them like right here in this meeting where they got to keep going to the doctor to stay regulated pharmaceuticals. You see what I'm saying? So it's all a part of the same machine. So no, there is no point to where it's going to be an automatic bouncing back towards the positive, because they're already playing the balance between positive and negative. And again, one of my last statements on this would be, positive and negative is not always good and bad.
Right.
Positive and negative are polarities.
Right.
It's a push and a pull. Right? And so it ain't good and bad that we're talking about here. We're talking about a push and a pull to maintain and regulate some type of balance. That's right. And somebody can be balanced in dis-ease.
Right.
To maintain their longevity in a disease state, as opposed to balance as in totally healthy.
Yeah. And by the way, what he just said, that's what co-optation looks like.
Wow.
Yeah.
Explain co-optation a little bit.
Well, you see that somebody is on a train in a certain direction toward a certain destination, and you want to get your hooks in them, and you know how to do it. So you start presenting them with something with a mirage. You know, because they're in the desert. You see that they haven't figured out exactly where they want to go, and they're still looking for heroes, right, to guide them. So you step in and find a way to turn them against the ones that they are currently following, right? And then you put yourself in their place, and then you start presenting them with the same things, use the same rhetoric, but now you're leading them in a totally different direction. So you're leading them inside the prison cell that you set up for them, but you put nice, pretty pictures and plants and stuff, and you know, and you got a fake paradise, like an amusement park or something.
All the mirrors.
So it's a pleasant pain.
Yeah.
There you go.
Jiddu Krishnamurti, who Bruce Lee was a big fan of, used to say, decorating the walls of your prison with fine landscapes and all this kind of stuff.
Profound.
And I've got to share this with you, because a lot of people, when I tell people about this, they get shocked. I start off by saying, I graduated undergraduate school with Howard Stern, you know, the shock jock.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And
so you knew him. Wow.
Well, I knew Tony Pagnotti, who was a good friend of his, but I didn't know Howard. Right? So I graduated with a degree in public relations, and I went into public relations afterwards. this was the year when I finally settled on public relations. I had come out of majoring in psychology, and I decided, well, this is nonsense, because I can't use any of what they're talking about on a regular day-to-day basis, right? Because they were labeling all these so-called disorders and all this kind of stuff. They kind of hang labels on you, right? Well, anyway, so I get in my first public relations specific class. And right away, on the first day of class, and this is pretty standard procedure, the professor says, okay, I bet you a lot of you came in here and you know, you think you just on a lark, basically. He said, raise your hand if you decided to major in public relations because you like talking to people. And I was one of the ones who raised my hand, and a bunch of the students did. He says, wrong answer. Here's the deal. People are stupid, and your job will be to take advantage of their stupidity. There you go. He said it just like that. There you go. Right? Okay. And he wasn't wrong about, you know, what he was talking about, what the actual profession is. Well, the father of public relations,
that's right,
is a guy named Edward Bernays.
Yes, he is.
He was a nephew of Sigmund Freud.
That's right.
Now Sigmund didn't feed him this stuff, but because it was a family member, he just took some of.
You talking about you talking about the one who established the IQ test?
No. Public relations.
No. You said Bernays.
Bernays. Edward Bernays.
Oh, Edward Bernays.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Bernays.
I missed not Bernays. I'm
Not,
sorry.
not Benet.
Yeah,
but
Bernays.
I apologize.
Bernays.
I misspoke.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
he was a super elitist, and he had disdain for the common people. Period. Right. So he devised. He took some of his uncle's theories and decided to use them to penetrate the mind, and devised the propaganda system that is used today. And that same system was adopted and all in by Joseph Goebbels.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And then
propaganda.
Yeah, and then
Tell them who Goebbels is.
Oh, he was the minister of propaganda for Hitler,
Hitler's
Nazi regime.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, well, so he tweaked it, and then some of the people who were using it, who were based in the United States and in some other Western nations, went over there and went to conferences with him and got some of his tweaks and brought them back here. Right. So by the time you know, I'm in that class, that had already been done.
And perfected.
Right. So they're always using. See, what's always going on is trying to. If I'm afraid of you, and this is where I can't even think of her name right now. I can see Frances Cress Welsing was so on point, and she talked about the whole driver behind the white supremacist system is the fear of genetic annihilation.
Yes.
Because scientifically, you're talking about dominant and recessive genes and all that stuff, and when they do the math and they do the science, they see that their lower pigmentation is recessive, right? So, so they set out. They had no connection to spirituality, or very little.
Right.
So there was no real belief that what really matters is not the body and the body color. But what matters is the nature of your being, your spirit, you know, spiritual expression, right? And, or I call it psycho-spiritual. So, so they set out to make themselves gods in the only way that they can imagine, which is existential or tangible, right? So, and if you look at the way the term power is defined, and it's used in all of our institutions. Power is defined as the ability. Actually, Dr. Jeff gave it the definition. It's the ability to make other people do things that they wouldn't have chosen to do without your influence.
Right.
What power actually is your ability to choose what you want to do and then go do it. You see? So what they did is flip that on its head and constantly tell you that you're weak and you really can't do anything on your own. You need a hero. So I'm volunteer to be your hero, right? Right. and you constantly have that coming at you. Your ancestors have had that coming at you, so they haven't been, unless they've been able to pull away from that and show you evidence that that it's a lie. Even if you come up with somebody who's really strong at bringing people out of that matrix, you may not believe them.
So Morpheus, for example, in the movie The Matrix, when he went in and started waking folks up, you know, one of the first things is people would resist, you know. But just to continue with the movie analogy, you know, Neo, he saw it, but he was already uneasy with his experience, and he started questioning reality anyway. And so he was prime target to be pulled out, you know. But he said everybody else, though, that's in the Matrix, they're potentially working for the Matrix and will fight you to maintain the Matrix and to maintain their own captivity, to maintain their own subjectivity to the will of the Matrix overall. And so one of the things that you were talking, Shifu, as I was thinking about, is that the way that I've understood the breakthrough is one of the first things that's necessary is self-discipline, because that self-discipline is a demonstration of your own power. You know, when you can be enticed by, when you can be stimulated by, and when you can be coerced by, but you can still say, nah, I'm good. Now you're demonstrating your power. You're showing that you can choose to do what you're going to do and not going to do, even when somebody else is trying to persuade you otherwise. So you see, that's the juxtaposition of those two definitions of power right there. When you can say, somebody say, hey, don't you want another drink? No, I'm good. They heard you going vegetarian now. Want a bite of this burger? No, I'm good. Man, you need to hit this, bro. It's that new bust your head open, brain oozing out your ear strand. I'm tight. I'm all right. You know, even though you've been smoking the last 20 years. When you can draw that line on those little things, and what a lot of the ancient arts talked about was specifically the sexual sublimation, meaning taking that sexual energy and transforming it into something else. And so what I always tell the brothers when I'm working with young brothers, you know, about self-control, self-mastery, and self-discipline. When you can have sex and stop yourself from ejaculating, right? When you can stop before you ejaculate, then you're demonstrating self-control and serious power. Because right there, what you're doing is that you're challenging, one, a natural biological and an anatomical physiological process, and you're pushing back against that whole procreative spirit that imbues everything that is alive, right? And when you can challenge that, and when you can stare that in its face, and consistently, well, we'll first understand what you've just done, and then you can look at the rest of the world with that same type of confidence, then you're starting to step and walk into your true power. And then all this negative energy, even though you may still participate and look at it, it won't have the same hold over you. It won't have the same level of influence over you. It won't be able to manipulate you as deeply as it would when you don't demonstrate your own self-control, self-discipline, and therefore self-power, self-empowerment.
Doc, what you think?
Basic.
Man, I know it's tough, right?
Said what he said.
Yeah.
What he said. I can't touch that.
I mean,
when you talk about self-discipline,
I doubt that,
right?
But okay.
When we talk about self-discipline, this sister got 30 black belts.
Right.
You know?
She's studying self-discipline, no question.
Yeah, so she knows it and can speak to it very practically.
Yeah.
She runs the
Absolutely.
empowerment center.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So it's really about thinking,
Yes.
and training and educating and empowering people to think about their choices. And it's really about centering self for their longevity and for their prosperity. And it's not just for them, but whatever they do, plus 7 generations forward, affects. So we think about that.
Okay, so we take all of this and we put it in perspective, because I'm still digesting much of this. I was so engrossed in it, I almost forgot my questions. But I'm back.
We're glad you're back.
Right.
So, all right, so when I go to social media, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I use it for, it has its benefits.
Sure.
Sure. And so when I go to social media, and the first things that I am constantly seeing is you're bombarded with this constant reinforcement of how powerful you are, right? But they need a negative image to reinforce how powerful you are. I'll give you an example. there's this one meme out there that has been going on. I've only been in social media for the last 3 years. So it's this one meme out there that shows the image of what people deem being the Christ, right? And then they'll have the image of a pharaoh, right? Not the appropriate word, but for the sake of argument.
Sure.
Urinating on the image of this Christ. They're using this image, this negative image, I think it's negative, to demonstrate how powerful we are because we're desecrating the image of a godlike figure that they use to enslave us mentally. All right?
Okay.
That particular image has been so powerful and so attractive to someone who seems to be insecure, if you will. Why does imagery like that is so necessary instead of just posting a beautiful picture of just who you are?
So it's the shock value of it. You know, what Shifu said earlier, it's an emotional tug. So let's say that I am a Christian, meaning one who aspires to be Christ-like, right? And so in that respect, let's say if I was a Christian that worshiped Jesus, right? Because I'm pretty sure that's the image that you're talking about.
Right.
Okay, so so it's an image of a white Jesus being urinated upon by an African pharaoh.
Right, exactly.
And so I'm assuming that it was the white Jesus, you know, and being urinated upon by an African pharaoh.
Sure.
And that's that shock value. It's going to tug at everybody's emotion. It's got something for everybody there.
Right.
It's going to draw in the Christian that worships, you know, and under the banner of a white Jesus, and say, how dare you desecrate God like that?
Right.
So that's going to be that aspect of the polarity.
Right.
And it's going to pull on those folks that's also like, and Black Power, you know, because we felt so disempowered by that same image of a white Jesus.
Right.
And now you're taking us back to the ancient times of where we ruled, and so now that's empowerment. But then at the same time, it's going to have those ones that are unsure. And they're going to grab their popcorn and they're going to watch the fight in the comment section. You know, and so it's that trigger.
Right.
And so it's that emotional pull. And it's amongst the intellectual debate. And, you know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so that one image right there tells a potential story. It could tell a story from the past. It could be an attempt to rewrite the story of Exodus. It could be a projection into the future for some people. But what it is, it takes that sometimes to jog people's mind, to get them to look. It's the same reason, like, for example, there's a commercial out right now, and, you know, I love to study marketing, and I think I might have missed my calling by going into, but I think I got enough of it in clinical psychology, you know, because still it's the manipulation of human emotions and mind states and stuff. But it's a commercial out right now, and it's a Butterfinger commercial. And just out the blue, it's a little alien laying on the table, and an alien gets up, steals a car, drives backwards as a race car like a Dukes of Hazzard joint, and, you know, snatches a Butterfinger from a dude on the street, said, nobody better lay a finger on my better Butterfinger. So it's like, what's the point of having this alien in this commercial? It has nothing to do with anything except for that shock value, that attention grabbing piece to make people talk about it like I'm doing right now. Right. And so I think that's the same thing why that negative energy is shock value purposes. It's enough to draw people in. And it's enough to offend people. It's enough to empower enough people to where people come together to have that debate and that discussion. And now that meme is being shared and shared and shared and is generating discussion. And the person that made it sits back like, it worked.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so now let's go with more of an extreme, you know, negative imagery. There has been a tremendous amount of videos where young Black women are constantly being videoed being in a combative form. They're fighting. And majority of the people oftentimes videoing this fight are the men. And because you can hear the commentary, ooh, the ahs and all of that. What has, I got it, I swear to goodness, if the question seems to be redundant, but I have to keep asking because I'm really thrown in the fact that is getting 1 million shares, and yet it's still, I understand it's a shock value, I understand exactly what you just told me, but it has to eventually be appalling. What do you I mean, as a woman, and you're seeing these young ladies fighting, and they're getting 1 million views, when is it going to eventually be appalling? What is going on in the African mind in which this so-called this matrix and this whole social engineering that we are victims of, I don't disagree with any of it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But it has to be something that triggers our nature to say, all right, come on, enough's enough.
There is no such thing as that.
Right. Yeah.
Appalling is the reaction, a negative reaction to something that you think should be happening differently. But if you think it's normal and natural, you don't think it should be happening differently. I can tell you right now, whenever I teach a human communication studies class, that's the main thing that I focus on teaching. And my students say to me, this is more of a psychology class than it is a communication class. But I say to them, back to them, that really what you study psychology to see how you form your perceptions and draw your conclusions about what your life is supposed to be and what things mean, what you mean, make sense of life. But then this communication aspect is, now what are you going to do about it, right? What are you going to do about the conclusion that you have drawn? How are you going to act on that? What are you going to use it for? And back after the Vietnam War and relatively independent press led to, they affected public opinion enough so that the momentum ended up shutting down the war effort. Big capital and big government officials who were constantly going back and forth between the two anyway, got together and they decided to put in place a strategic plan that married the two of those things even more closely. And then all of a sudden, in the late 70s, starting in the late 70s, you start to see all these mergers and acquisitions. And included in all that, we had these horizontally wide-scale organizations and vertically and horizontally connected. And they bought up about 95% or more of the media outlets and all that kind of thing. So they were concentrated in no more than like 5 or 6 companies. Now, what they started, and I think Dr. Jeff started mentioning the music industry. Well, one of the things that was done was artists were, after that, forbidden to record message music. That would be positive message music. They were told that nobody would buy it, and we're not going to sign you if you're going to insist on making that kind of music. So they would had pressure put on them. The whole point of it was to drive people to think only about their own self-interest, by the way, which was the main crux of Bernays' system. All right. So only think about yourself. Don't think about your neighbor. Don't think about your community. Think about yourself and the pleasure you're going to get. All right. In concert with that, we had the removal of critical thinking training activities in public schools.
Okay.
So process thinking activities were removed, critical thinking activities were removed, and a lot of the living historical study was removed. So the youngsters now coming up don't even get that kind of practice. So they don't know.
All right, welcome back. Coming back from a short intermission, we're going to continue with our discussion. So, Shifu, as you were saying, because I was really, not to discount what you were saying, but I also wanted to kind of get it from a female perspective too.
Sure.
When you're seeing that type of female violence to one
Sure,
another.
sure,
but,
sure.
but continue what you were saying, because I also want to hear from Dr. Owens what she sees
Sure.
and how she think we can resolve that issue.
Yeah. So I was just saying. So the kinds of training that would enable somebody to make the proper kind of decision, so that they would be appalled by what you're talking about, has been removed. So people have no real solid foundation for even making that call, and it's now. Let me give you an example. Even from I taught at Howard University in the 90s, and I remember there was this one brother. I assigned an informative presentation. So where the students had to teach us something for a certain amount of time, and I made the mistake of not setting the proper parameters, right? So this one young man comes into the class to do his speech. And he was an ROTC guy, so I would have never have expected this from him. But he gets up and he says, "Okay, here's what I'm gonna talk about today: how to buy drugs from a ghetto drug dealer without getting jacked." And I said, "Well, that's not appropriate for a classroom." And he and his classmates shouted me down. Of course.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So now going back to what you were asking about, just realize that that's because of no foundation. Take it away.
Oh my goodness, man.
It's from a female perspective. There's two things, and it may be many, especially after my colleagues respond, that there's a sexual dynamic when women fight amongst men. And it goes back with the European mud fights, mud slinging. There's just something sexual, has to do with a lot of Freudian discussion. I won't go into it, but it's a sexual dynamic in terms of that. Also, when women are fighting, it's power control over them. They think that they're dominating each other, but the witnesses are actually dominating them when they fight. And so when you are able to look at that, and then it will dictate your behavior. I don't fight over men, whether it's a intimate relationship or anything with another woman. Would never do that.
Right.
And so when you come from that dynamic, you have a better power stance than actually the fighting against. Because it's more of a mental game than a physical game. That's my perspective. What do you think?
So what I do know, and I'm going to warn y'all, you mess with me, Dr. Owens gonna take you down. This I know for sure. No, but I mean, I do agree with what Dr. Owens is saying, though, as far as the sexual dynamic and all that underneath that, because there's a close association with sex and violence, right? And I think it's the irritated genie. He always talks about the European or the Greek perspective is always coming from an angle of sex and aggression. Sex and aggression. You know, you hear that's part of his mantra, sex and aggression. And so earlier you talked about, I think you might have mentioned pleasurable pain or something to that.
Yes.
And so part of it is to associate some form of pleasure with your literal pain, so they could get you to buy into the painful expression more.
Yes.
Again, it all buckles back down to that conditioning, that association of two. So the first condition I spoke about earlier was operant, when it's like the reward and punishment system. But then you've got this other form of conditioning called classical, to where you can associate two things that aren't related to each other, right?
Yeah.
But then somehow in the mind of the observer or the experiencer, make them related to the point to where one will produce the response that the other one usually produces.
That's right.
And when you can do that, like I mentioned it with the dogs, they made a dog salivate and prepare itself to eat when it saw a light come on. Lights turning on don't make dogs eat.
Right.
Unless their food has been directly associated with that like.
Right.
And so with us, it's something that's being associated. And I think that in the social media world, it's the amount of likes, it's the amount of comments, it's the amount of sharing. That's the association.
Immediate gratification.
So just gratification, period.
Okay,
It ain't
okay.
got to be immediate.
Okay.
But just the gratification,
Okay.
that's the reward.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And if you are heavily rewarded for showing people fighting, then it's going to make it more likely that not only you produce more fight videos, but that everybody else is going to start doing it as well, because everybody's after that same prize.
Yes.
And it's built into the mechanism. I mean, we're talking now neurochemistry. You know, when endorphins start to spike and these pleasure hormones start to spike.
That's right.
You know, and it's from being accepted by this community of millions, billions of people now. And now you're comparing the amount of acceptance you got to this next person, and you say, oh, dang, they got more followers than me.
Yeah.
Now, how do I get my followers up? That's what you hear. I'm trying to get my followers up.
Yeah.
I saw a prank the other day on April Fool's Day where this young lady and her play cousin or whoever this little dude was, they put their lives in jeopardy talking bad to the adult black woman that's responsible for their lives. You know, they put their lives on the line messing with her, talking disrespectful and all this, and the girl said, I got to get my likes up. I got to get my likes up. And so people are literally, like you said, that whole critical thinking, that self-preservation piece takes second seat now.
To relationships.
To the relationship of being accepted. Right?
Right.
And so now, when you can associate these things, so we sit and we can think logically about this stuff all day. And logically, well, that doesn't make any logical sense. And it's because they're not functioning out of logic anymore.
They aren't.
It's pure emotion at this point. It's, in fact, so much that, and I was saying earlier, is that the people who created these social media platforms, they themselves have recently apologized and have kind of withdrawn themselves from it. And I'm not meaning to take themselves out of it, because they were never in it.
Right.
But withdrawn themselves from like supporting it fully, because they knew what they did intentionally was to manipulate the emotions of people to get people hooked as if it was a drug.
Yeah.
You got people that wake up in the middle of the night just to check, their social media, and will stay up for 4 hours, knowing they got to go to work in the morning. They go to work tired rather than just leaving the phone alone. And so all this was part of the process. And a lot of these technological gurus and giants would not let their children participate in this stuff, because they know
What they're doing.
the harm of it all.
And because you put me in mind earlier with the sex, when you mentioned about the sexual aggression, I had just did a book review the other day regarding Michael Bradley's book, The Iceman Inheritance, and how he emphasized that so much on that has been their driving force of dominance and their place in this world on global dominance and control. And so sexual aggression has always been why they marginalize even their own. So you really brought it home with that for me. That now, in a nutshell, the African mind has never been in need of natural resources and pleasure, because we've always come from somewhere that has been. We've never had to put ourselves in a position of trying to eradicate others to get something.
Well, we're not coming from a place of scarcity.
And right. So in a nutshell, what you're really saying to me is the African mind has been so manipulated with a Eurocentric thought process, in our aggression and in our needs of always trying to find dominance and control somewhere, that you're no longer of your natural state of mind.
Amos Wilson says you're out of your mind.
You are out of your mind.
He says, as a matter of fact, the system needs you out of your mind.
Yes.
In order for it to continue to be successful.
That's true.
Yes.
And which is really deep, because in the world of clinical psychology, I teach theories of personality.
Yeah.
And I show first day of class. I open up to page 2 of the textbook.
Right.
And I show my students, I say, take a look at all of these theorists that we're going to be talking about. Tell me something that's similar about all of them.
Yeah.
Take about a few seconds. They're all white. What else? They're all old. What else? They're all men.
Yeah.
I said, well, except for that one. There's
Right.
one on there, Karen Horney. She's on there too.
Right. Okay.
She's a feminist theorist, and so.
Okay.
I said, and so this is the worldview, the theoretical perspective through which we're supposed to understand ourselves as human beings.
Right.
And I said, so you got to think about what would their perspective be of us.
Yeah.
Especially during the time periods that they were writing and formulating these theories. Right. And so we get this one-sided view of the game. Which is why it's necessary, and this is Amos Wilson says this as well. He says that because we're basing our standards of what's healthy as far as our mental processes are concerned, and what's unhealthy, we're basing that on a society that itself is unhealthy. That means that you're going to be further perpetuating and proliferating disorder and mental health issues as opposed to bringing forth mental healing.
Yeah.
So before we really get to the conclusion of this, I got another question. How is it that pseudo scholarship is so prevalent?
What do you mean by pseudo scholarship?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Okay, so it seemed like there's no checks and balances when these particular, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but I won't use the word pseudo, but what I will say is there is a process of studying and of these so-called secret laboratories of always studying behavior, but it almost seems as though there's no counteract towards it. There's no counter. We're not setting aside our own laboratories, or we're always reactionary. We're not proactive. We're reactionary. And how do they get away with such tactics where we're not combating this?
Dr. Wells, so two people, Francis Cress Wells, who was brought up earlier by Shifu, which is a dear teacher, mentor, friend of mine, and Mr. Neely Fuller Jr.
Right.
The same.
Right.
Mentor, friend, elder of mine. He talks about the code. He talks about a counter-racist code.
Right.
System concept.
Right.
And so he says you codify, in other words, your laboratory as far as he's concerned is your everyday walk. And you begin to codify your behavior on a daily basis as you move through life. Right? That's what he says to do. So that's your laboratory to counteract this onslaught of things that's trying to put you in a particular bucket.
But how can the untrained mind, who's already out of their mind?
That's it. He said you begin to codify your behavior at whatever level that you can.
Yeah.
But the people under these particular, but we have a youth and a segment of our community who is in such a disarray.
They're watching us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're walking around uncodified, then there's no reason for them to be.
Okay.
That's
So
true.
we have to become the living examples of it.
Yes, sir.
We began, because the code
That's
is
right.
more than a
Starts
notion.
with us.
Okay.
This thing is deep.
It
And
is.
it's in all 9 areas of people activity. You got
That's
entertainment, you got economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
That's right.
You codify your behavior in all of those areas of people activity. So when the children see two adults interacting, husband and wife, interacting in a codified manner, it begins to it gives them their example and their standard of what it is. Dr. Wells talks about how mental health, how we are literally produced to be out of our minds, and it's in direct response to our experience of racism and white supremacy.
Right.
So if you can buffer how you respond to that almost ubiquitous system, then what you're doing is you're countering that system. And
Okay.
Mr. Fuller says that this code is how you respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah. 2 years ago, January 2017, I ran across a very short quote that changed everything for me. And here's the quote. "It is easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled." And I had been trying to, based on the same kind of feeling that you're expressing here in your questions, I've been trying, oh yeah, why don't you look at this, brother? My sister, why don't you look at this? They'd be like, I don't need that.
Right.
Because now, so and I was wondering, how come, it seems like it should make so much sense, right? But here's the thing. People have cultivated their identities over their full lives, right? So when you come in and say, well, why don't you look at things differently? That's going to change your identity, basically. And when they start to see what kind of impact it's going to have and what kind of reactions they're going to get from people who are dear to them, right? And if those reactions aren't positive right up front, because they want likes, right? I even remember I was talking to, I had a mentee or apprentice in the college that I retired from. And he was really a dynamic brother. He lives in Texas now. And also a martial artist, right? Gravitate towards martial arts. Anyway, he had a following among his fellow students, and he was a positive influence. So one day we were talking in the cafeteria, and one of his followers came up and was listening to what we were talking about. And he was all intrigued and really excited about what we were saying. But then he said to us, I'm really believe 100% in what you were talking about, but I'm too scared to do it.
And that's a point Dr. Wells also made.
Yeah.
She said she was talking to a little boy and said, "Don't you want to grow up and help black people?" He said, "No." And she said, "Why?" He said, "Because you'll get killed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
You'll get killed for that."
Yes.
You know. And
Right.
so you know, and so somebody, you know, telling you
Wow.
kill each other, smoke dope, you know, rape, pillage. You're going to live. You're going to have a long life, wealth of contracts, and keep making those music videos and songs. But somebody like you know, like I don't know, pick it, Malcolm X, you know, Martin Luther King, who was preaching love.
Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus. You know, and that's the way they're taken out. And so there again, that's that reward and punishment thing. You know, kids are smart.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a minute, so I can run and I could be this all day.
Okay.
And long life, fame, and wealth. But if I start trying to do that, then I'm talking about political prisoner potential. I'm talking about taking out, because even now, you know, with the recent rapper that was killed, Nipsey Hussle, people are saying that he was killed because he had a positive message and was trying to do something to alleviate gang activity in his community. So, you know, that's still to be, you know, determined, but it's not a far-fetched possibility.
Yeah.
Not because it's gang banging.
Right.
But because of its positive influence.
Yeah, when I was working on my doctoral dissertation, I ran across a dissertation that was done at UCLA in 1971, and by a guy named Harry Scoble. Okay. And what he was studying was the institutional responses to freedom fighting. Right, and it was a progressive set of responses. That the first one was just trying to completely marginalize it and dismiss. The final one was take them out, kill them.
Yeah, and I think it's intentional to keep the trauma going. So for my mother's generation, Martin Luther King. For, you know, my generation, it could be someone that is taken out because of their positive influence, and then recently because of you know, the new generation, they need to have their trauma of seeing a good brother trying to unite and negotiate with police and buy businesses, Nipsey Hussle. And I think it's a reverberation of here's somebody doing good and they still get killed. So you might as well just do your thing and continue the negativity.
Okay. Yeah. And we have to be, one last thing.
Well, we don't have a conclusion.
Okay. Oh, okay. You know, we have to be careful too. How come we don't stand up? Actually, there have been quite a few examples of communities developed and run and resided in by black people around the country, and all of them have been attacked and destroyed. Yes. And you can see evidence of, there's a whole segment of the Museum of African American History and Culture where that actually gives you history and background and pictures and all that kind of stuff of a lot of these communities.
So like Tulsa,
right?
Oklahoma, and Black Wall Street,
Rosewood.
Rosewood.
Right. So it's not that we haven't been trying to do those things.
Of course not.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's very important. See, a lot of people believe that we've never done those things. Yeah. So they say, why don't we, what we do? And it's just that.
I mean, you got the Red Summer of 1919 where they just went completely berserk and started destroying all the black communities.
Yeah, like the mysterious fires that happen at black universities, black institutions. The one in Tennessee recently.
Sure, absolutely.
The 3 churches in Louisiana recently.
Yeah.
One of my elders just sent me a list of all the HBCUs that have opened and closed. Yeah. And there are several of them that have an entry mysteriously burned down. Mysteriously burned down. And that mysterious word to me means, you know, white supremacists burned it down. Right. But see, it happens. And, you know, I mean, right now, one of my main concerns have been over the past 5 or 6 years is, you know, our institutions of higher learning. Right. You know, there's already a track record of mysteriously burning them down. You know, but in the age of school shootings and things of that nature, you know, and church shootings and things of that nature, I'm like, you know, we're gonna have to tighten up. Right.
Yeah.
Because if it crossed my mind, it had to cross their mind.
Right. Yeah, it's the same thing. I think that we, you know, have to do considerable work in terms of our resiliency and continue to do the work. But as you're saying, have the protective factors up to secure that the work can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go for another break real quick, and when we come back, we're going to have a conclusion of this wonderful segment.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
One of the things that I believe we should do as a people is to begin our day, every day, with something that's purposeful and meaningful for our lives, and not allow ourselves to be on the agenda of Instagram, YouTube. Is to introspect, is to start out at least for the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes of our day with something that's positive. Whether we have a journal that focuses on our goals, have what our goals are for the day, affirmations that are positive, the meditation, which is, I think, is very important for starting our day, is starting with that and turning off the news, turning off what's bad, what's going on, because we always know that's going to be happening. But we do that, intentionalizing our day that's on a positive message.
Nice. As far as I'm concerned, I would say that one of the first steps would be to increase your self-discipline. Increase your mastery over yourself. Start with small things. You have a craving for something, go without it that one time, and then go without it the next 2-3 times. So that self-mastery is the key, to empowerment as far as I'm concerned. Learn as much as you can about as much as you can. So always stay thirsty, always stay hungry, never be satisfied with the amount of things that you know, because there's always more that you can know. And open yourself up to be receptive, to wisdom, and also discerning, so you can understand what's wise and what's not, right? And just live your life trying to be the best version of you that you absolutely can be.
My life itself right now is dedicated to sharing with people the keys to something I call emotional wizardry. Now, what does that mean? Well, being disciplined, like Dr. Jeff said, with your in managing your emotions, which means you have to actually go down there and explore down your rabbit hole to see what's there. Now, the key activity that will enable you to do the things that my two esteemed colleagues just talked about is learning the scientific art of empathic listening without judgment. Practice that. You can even get yourself into a daily practice. I call it a total silence exercise. So listen to people without formulating a response and really try to get a handle on what they mean, what kind of reaction they're trying to get from you, and then you can make a determination whether you're going to give them that. If their intentions for you are harmful, then you can see that and shut that down without even having a fight. But the main thing is learn how to listen without judgment. That takes a lot of practice, very difficult, but it's worthwhile.
This concludes another episode of Real Reason TV. I appreciate everyone for attending and watching. I also appreciate each one of my panelists. All of their information will be located on the bottom of the screen. All of their full names, the school in which they teach, contact information. Please leave a comment. Please like. Please share. Please subscribe. Real Reason TV. Thank you so much.